If I just take away traffic and just said, I was the president of the Philippines and said, you know what, we have this enemy arrived on our shores taking 5.4 billion pesos a day, and it's putting our, everyone would say, everyone stop what you're doing. Let's do COVID on this. Let's treat it like COVID. It's locked down until this is solved. Like even COVID wasn't that drastic when you look at the figures. Yet the whole world stopped.
Yeah.
So why don't we see it the same way?
Right.
It's still, when you remove the facade of it, okay, traffic, it doesn't matter what it is. It's costing the Filipinos over between 3 to 5 billion a day. We just can't move. Now our GDP and everything gets affected by that. Quality of living, house prices, real estate prices, everything gets affected by that. But I think because it's so multifaceted that there's no one sort of single point where you can blame. So it's always like, it's just this, it's just that, it's just this, it's just that. Well, get to it. I mean, let's fix it. Why can't we fix it? So it's a great time to be. For me personally, I was just in one of my groups saying, what a great time to be alive. Fuck. Yeah. So happy because it's like common sense is finally prevailing.
Did you notice that they removed the censorship on the platforms now? But you're seeing all the dark side stuff now. I saw a bunch of propaganda for ISIS, for example.
That's still illegal, though. I mean, that is illegal. That always has been illegal.
Well, it wasn't ISIS. It was like Islamic fundamentalists.
It's like when we talk about Bitcoin and stuff. Its sovereignty comes with responsibility. You can't have one without the other. So, yes, there are risks. You lose your seed phrase, that's it. No 1-800 number to call, no FDIC, no nothing, right? But in return, look what you get. You don't get questioned where you spend your money. You don't get censored. You don't need permission. So are you ready to put your big boy pants on? If that's what you're ready for. Now, the internet's the same thing. I see the same thing. I mean, money and speech money's the most powerful form of speech, right? So same thing with free speech. People say, oh, yeah, but bad things are going to happen. Well, welcome to the world.
Right.
Welcome to, what's your solution? That we just shield you from it? We censor it? We've seen where that takes us.
I was asking, Rovi, and Rovi came on my podcast, but he was very, very cautious about speaking about politics.
Of course,
or any type of corruption. And so I asked him, do we have freedom of speech in the Philippines? Is that in our constitution?
Are you asking me, or are you
I'm asking you now.
We do have, but I think we've reached a stage of a self-censorship. So we technically have it, but we know what's going to happen if we say it. Does that make sense? There are consequences. So, but freedom of speech never implied no freedom of consequences. I mean, you have to stand by what you said. A great example of that is this UFC fighter right now, Bryce Mitchell. I don't know if you know this UFC fighters and stuff, but he's a popular UFC fighter, real hillbilly. Nice guy. I mean, I like watching him fight. Anyway, he comes up with some crazy stuff. One, he's a flat earther, right? Total flat earther. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the other day he went on the podcast and he said that Hitler was a good guy and I would go fishing with him if I had the chance, because I think he's totally misunderstood and blah, 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 blah. So he took a completely, where are you going with this, bro? You can't get more taboo than that, right? Yeah. But he doubled down. He said, no, I think it's, but he went on a rant about the Jews and stuff like that. Now, Dana, who's the champion of free speech, he got out and he said, he's a effing idiot. He's a... It just started going to town and what a freaking idiot, whatever. And they were like, okay, so what are you going to do, Dana? What do you mean what I'm going to do? Well, what do you think I'm going to do? I just said I just think he's an idiot. That's all I'm going to do.
Right.
Yeah, but aren't you going to... No.
Right.
You're allowed to say dumb shit. And I'm allowed to say it's dumb and you're stupid and you pay a social cost for that.
Yeah.
I don't need to pull him off my roster. Yeah. I don't need to tell him, hey, don't mention Hitler anymore.
Right.
If he wants to do that and be treated, because the society will react.
Right.
So that's why I think, to answer your question, I think we do have protected free speech because we are a democracy. I haven't gone through our constitution to tell you exactly. I don't know it off by heart. But I know that we are a democracy and we are allowed freedom of speech. But the self-censoring comes in because, one, there's the people that you speak about. Your voice only counts when it matters, right? Like if you have a following of 20, 30 people and you can say what you want.
Yeah.
If you have a following of 1 million, it's totally different.
Right.
So there. It's not necessarily by law, but we know how we can get around that. Look, in the States, they do things like debanking because there's no law. In the States, you're not allowed to, of course, curtail freedom of speech. But there's no law for the government to lean on the bank to say, hey, we don't like this person. They call them PEPs, politically exposed people. So they don't like your politics. They just go to JP Morgan and say, this guy, he's a bit dodgy. And JP Morgan just read between the lines and say, okay, John, sorry, but you can't bank here. And like, why? We just, we're a private company. We can choose who we allow in our company. And that's how they get around the freedom of speech. So here, we're just got more creative ways.
But here, isn't the consequences much worse?
That's why it's self-censorship.
Right.
Because technically speaking, anyone if you went and asked a constitutional lawyer, I'm pretty sure they'd tell you that, yes, you can say what you want to say, but try it.
Right.
It's up to you. Want to take the risk? Try it. Might not get a subpoena, but you might get a riding in tandem.
Right.
Or something else. I mean, it depends what you say and who you say it to.
Yeah. So when you came out, and I remember seeing you spoke out in Congress about traffic. Mm-hmm. And I think that was pretty impactful, and everyone was like, hell yeah. Like, everyone was like behind you about this stuff. I mean, were you saying anything that wasn't already said? I mean, did you ever really come out about the fundamental issues about why traffic is such a big problem? And I mean, because I think you looked at things in a much deeper level. I remember conversating with you, and you were telling me how, the powers to be don't want to fix the problems.
I think.
Did you ever feel the freedom to speak about this stuff?
I did, mostly from ignorance, and I was naive.
Yeah.
So I accidentally, but I didn't get too much backlash from that, because I think people understand when I say that. I think I said it in the way that there's more profit sometimes in chaos than order. Uh-huh. So there's more incentive to keep it that way. So when you're tackling a problem head on, what seems to be the obvious solution is just completely, we're skirted. It's the elephant in the room, right? So I started bringing up these things to the public. So when you asked me about whether these had been brought up before, I don't think I was saying anything new, but I think I was probably one of the first to publicly say it, because I was just articulating the feelings of motorists and private car users and road users. And this is not normally an angle that was taken, because normally when we speak about transport, there's some disconnected transport official up there speaking on behalf of the government. Of course, that's not necessarily aligned with what the public feel. They're just giving out sound bites and ticking off boxes and whatever. People can't relate. So somebody who was invested in the public because of my social media page, I had a TV show at the time which did nothing but transport. You hear this, it's ground level stuff, and you're conversing with people all the time, from Grab drivers to your own driver, you drive yourself. This was my world. So I just articulated those feelings and just happened to be in a spot where the entire nation happened to be listening at the same time, because it was a convergence of everything. It was like I compare it to like an American Idol guy. He's a guy that's been singing in bars for like 30 years, and then one day he appears on American Idol, he nails it, or whatever talent show, and he's like, oh my God, where did this guy come from? He's an overnight sensation. Yeah. No, not really. He just got an opportunity to do what he's been doing for the last 30 years, and he just nailed it on that one attempt, and that's great. And that's pretty much how I felt. It's like I'd been having these conversations, what I felt like was every day. Right. And then one day I got put on a national platform, and it was live television, and it happened to be a issue that everybody really felt, from socio-economic. It transcended all those barriers, because whether really rich people to middle class to lower middle class, they were all using Uber, and they could also see the benefits of ride sharing. So it just made sense. And so I got this massive support, like it was overwhelmingly so, actually, to the point where, everyone was just right behind me for that. And sadly, didn't really fix the Uber problem. I don't want to get into that because it's so many years ago, but they dropped the ball with that. And then we ended up with a monopoly. I mean, we still have ride sharing, but not in the way that it was designed or intended to. Right. And that I believe is one of the pound for pound best solutions that you could implement in a country or a city like Metro Manila, that could have a giant impact on traffic, because pound for pound, it doesn't cost you much to allow ride sharing. I mean, obviously a subway would work a lot better, but yes, you're talking 10 years, you're talking billions and hundreds of billions that you need to invest in that, and of course all the traffic that it creates while you're building it. Ride sharing you could implement in a few months, and it would solve the private car addiction, which is the main source of traffic here in Metro Manila. It's because, it's the most inefficient way to move people around, yet we don't have another alternative. So you can't blame the private car people. So this was the only thing that kind of made a dent in that area, and that was the crucial area. That was what they call the theory of, resistance, That's the one that was blocking. So if we could make a dent in the private car space, we would make a massive impact on the road, because one car could service 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 families.
Let's start by talking about how big the problem really is, right? We know it's a problem. We obviously live it, but is there any way to quantify it? Because I looked up the stats and they said Manila, surprisingly to me, that it was ranked the most congested city in the world. And I was thinking India, for example. I was thinking about cities in India was worse. But there are some rankings out there that say Manila is the worst.
Yes.
Right. And there was an estimated cost of this, due to lost productivity, lost time, et cetera, et cetera. And the list goes on, actually. And they're estimating about 3.5 billion daily due to traffic congestion lost every single day. And I don't even know if you can quantify it, but that's what it's saying. How big of an impact do you think this really has on our society? Is there any way you can describe this?
Massive. Yes, that figure came from JICA, and that was around 2020 when they released the 3.5 billion stat. That's up to about 5.4 billion now. It's a projected 5.4. So it's projected 5.4 if we don't change by 2034 or something like that. So we really need to do something. And yes, it doesn't take into account, John, the psychological, emotional. There are so many aspects here that you cannot quantify. The loss of family time. It's health. Even your health suffers. If you're in traffic for 4 hours a day, so much happens. And we cannot put a figure on that, which is why I get increasingly frustrated when I talk about it, because I'm like, if this was any other enemy that we said, if I just take away traffic and just said, I was the president of the Philippines and said, you know what, we have this enemy is arrived on our shores taking 5.4 billion pesos a day, and it's putting our... everyone would say, everyone stop what you're doing. Let's do COVID on this. Let's treat it like COVID. It's locked down until this is solved. Even COVID wasn't that drastic when you look at the figures. Yet the whole world stopped.
Yeah.
So why don't we see it the same way?
Right.
It's still, when you remove the facade of it, traffic, it doesn't matter what it is. It's costing the Filipinos over between 3 to 5 billion a day. We just can't move. Now, our GDP and everything gets affected by that. Quality of living, house prices, real estate prices, everything gets affected by that. But I think because it's so multifaceted that, there's no one sort of single point where you can blame. So it's always like, it's just this, it's just that, it's just this, it's just that. Well, get to it. I mean, let's fix it. Why can't we fix it?
Right.
It's not... I would rather have this problem than an invisible virus or something like that, because this problem happens throughout every city, throughout time.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but it's predictable, and the solutions are laid out. There are blueprints for it. We're not trying to find a cure for some mystery disease. It is something so common.
Well, I mean, you think about all the times you're driving on the road, and I'm just questioning, coming from, growing up in a first world country and coming here, and it's like, who designed these roads? You're driving along, you're merging into lanes, and none of the lanes even fit right. You can barely fit your car in there, and all of a sudden a cinder block just pops up out of nowhere in front of you, and it's not even safe. Next thing you know, the bus is stopping on the middle of the road, letting passengers out on the right side, and you're just like, "Holy shit! This is crazy."
We actually had very good planning, like in the early 50s, 60s, 70s, I think, were our heydays for that. And then it kind of just dropped off completely.
After World War II.
Not even after World War II, because World War II, we started planning, right? From before we had to rebuild the city, and then Makati was built, I think, somewhere around the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. And then it started. So there was a plan, but then what happens here in the Philippines is, one, our population growth is pretty fast.
Right.
And then it just becomes reactionary. Everyone just reacts to the problem. They don't foresee it anymore. So it was designed, I can't tell you the figure, but it wasn't designed for as many people as it has now. So we're just winging it every time. We're making little solutions, reacting to different things, and that's why it looks the way you described, because there's no urban planning. There's no long-term thought and design in the city. We're just trying to all fit in, and that's why wherever you fit na lang, no?
Yeah.
And that makes it so unusable in many ways, you know? I mean, have you seen our bike lanes? We finally got bike lanes, but exactly. And I get a lot of grief for this. I get so much grief from the cyclists every time I bring this up. And I'm like, I am a cyclist. I ride. I'm not going to ride there. That's not a proper cycle lane. And they're saying, well, it's better than nothing. Actually, I disagree there. I disagree. You pay taxes. You deserve better than that. Do not share a lane with a moving bus and car. And no, it doesn't. That's not a proper bus lane, bike lane. Just segregate it, and then people will use it. And then we have the chicken and the egg system, where they're saying, well, there's not enough people using it, so we're not going to make it. So, well, they're not using it because you don't make it properly.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to give, right? But I think to design these in retrospect or in hindsight, no, it doesn't work. You got to forward plan these things.
Well, there's that part of it, right? There's the planning, the development, designing things that make sense for the capacity that you have. There's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is maybe cultural, right? Because you mentioned on one of your podcasts, you said Filipinos are like, when they drive, they're like UFC on wheels.
Yeah, that's true.
Like they're so kind and thoughtful to their family members, and they'll die for their family members.
Yep.
But in public, they don't give a shit. Like
it's so pronounced, because I think I don't know what the psychological explanation for it is, but yes, we do have this we make a distinction between the public and the private sphere. So when you make eye contact with a driver, you notice that everything changes here. I mean, as long as when you make eye contact, you're not giving him the look, right? I mean, you make eye contact like you're looking, can you let me in? If he catches your eye, that's it. It's over. He's letting you in.
Right.
And he's even offering, have you eaten? Kumain ka na ba? Because we're just hospitable like that. But we have to sort of make an eye contact and know you. That's why when we walk around in malls and stuff, we're very polite too.
Yeah.
We don't really cut in front of you in a physical line.
Yeah.
And there are some countries they do that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you get the odd ones, but it's not cultural. But as soon as we get behind the wheel, it all changes. Because a Dutch anthropologist put it well. He goes, it's when you make the distinction between the public and the private sphere, we see the public sphere as a jungle where anything is valid in order to bring commodities into the private sphere.
Right.
So that's how we view it. It's almost like, it's a jungle out there. Go do whatever, fair game.
Right.
As long as you bring it back to your family. So that means just getting home on time. So it doesn't matter if you block 20 people to do it. You're just looking out for yourself.
Right.
There's we don't have that sense like Japan, where it's this mindfulness of others. It's ingrained in the culture.
Right.
Like that's.
But the reverse side of that in Japan is you don't see the same togetherness in family.
No, you don't. Exactly.
And,
trade-off.
So that's
Correct.
the trade-off. But there's so much. They're so ethical in public, and it's just very mindful about, very polite. But in a personal aspect, there's just none of that. So there's just totally the reverse.
I see what you're saying.
Right. So what would you rather have? Right. So
exactly. There are always trade-offs.
Yeah.
And yes, I think long term I still would prefer here. because I put a lot of value on that, the family and the culture that we share. We're very warm people, but not the most polite on the road, not the most polite behind the keyboard.
No, not at all. There was an estimate that, commuters average about 1.5 to 2 hours per trip. Imagine the normal family, their parents are commuting 3 to 4 hours a day.
That's very conservative.
That is
yes, it's conservative because like when I was doing the transport show, I would do this man on the street stuff a lot.
Yeah.
And when I was doing it with CNN, I would go and really talk to people, and I found the average was about 3 hours one way, because a lot of them live in Cavite, Laguna, Bulacan. They're not living in Metro Manila because it's just too expensive.
Right.
So these people are leaving at like 4 a.m. just to get to work by 8.
And then you have an 8 to 10 hour work.
And then you have an 8 to 10 hour working day. Then you got to get back. Then
Right.
they have to usually prepare food for their kids and get them ready. That's not a life. That's not a life for anybody. And that's why I really felt I needed to fight for these people. I needed to be their voice as much as I could, because it was just inhumane. And people are still losing. And I just think it's worse now, probably.
Yeah.
That was before the pandemic when I was doing those interviews.
Yeah, imagine you're living. We've been talking to a couple of influencers about how to fix financial literacy, and Chris was like, "Well, if you can't even solve the basic needs, right? And you're just so stressed out from day to day just to get back from your daily commute. You imagine the psychological impact that you have to go through with your family as well. I mean, even raising your kids and things like that. Like, how is that? How do people even be productive under those conditions, right?
The Filipino is considered one of the most resilient races on earth, and we always usually trumpet that every time there's a storm and stuff like that. Sadly, I think that's being exploited a lot because, you're resilient. Filipinos are resilient. We come up with memes and stuff like that. And yes, I think it's a wonderful trait we have, but I also don't like it when it's abused because they think, we're not going to solve this because Filipinos are resilient. Nobody's that resilient. And I think if you're that resilient after a while, it slowly kills you inside. Like you said, what's the point? What's your purpose anymore if you're going to spend 6 hours or more, some cases, a day just on the road?
Does anyone profit from this?
A lot of people do profit from it. I mean, the public transportation companies, our bus companies make a lot of,
Right.
They're lucrative. And I don't know if there's anyone that would profit from solving it. So maybe if you wanted to be really precise about it, maybe they're not necessarily making money from the chaos per se, but they lose money by fixing it.
Really? You think?
Some sectors for sure. Sectors for sure. Because if you can get 50, like you can overload your bus by 30, 40 people and stuff like that. If the public transportation's fixed, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
And then that's just numbers for them. That's not human lives. It's just numbers, just load it up as much as you can, get as many trips as you can. And that's why we used to have, we keep fighting over this system. It's called the boundary system, where the bus driver is paid per passenger rather than just paid a salary. But we've tried it the other way, and the bus drivers don't want it the other way, because they don't earn as much if they're earning a salary.
Right.
But then they compete like gladiators when they're put on commission.
Right.
So you see how we've tried it already. It's like this would solve the problem if you are disciplined and you just, like in most countries, the bus driver stops, and then if you're not there, the bus stop, he just moves.
Right.
But here, they'll just keep on there riding and beeping their horns until you get into we have MMDA that are, whacking your bus with sticks and stuff like that. But there's still, the incentive has not been removed.
Right.
So you gotta rewire the reward loop for that. But again, when we tell them, they're like, they don't want. They want the old system because they earn more money.
Yeah. And you think about it, this must be one of the biggest reasons. I mean, geographically, we're bordered by 2 bays, so that has something to do with it. But this is considered one of the most dense populations in the world.
It is.
Right? Usually in other places, you'll start to see an urban sprawl. And the only way you can do that is if you had, public transportation where you had easy access, right? If traffic was fixed, I'd imagine, there would be a bigger urban sprawl across the Philippines.
Yes. Yes. That would be the next thing that would need to be done is you have to decentralize.
Right.
We're not really focused on that. I know that they've tried, they're doing Clark now, they're doing Bulacan for around the airport and stuff like that. But I would think you should still go more aggressive with a decentralization plan, create industry outside, like set it up already as early as now, create the tax incentives for certain industries that you want to develop out there.
Right.
Build it and they will come, so to speak.
Right.
And then create that, you have to create, there's only one way. You can't renovate a house that you live in. And Metro Manila is it's a house that's full to the brim and it's falling apart too. So how are we going to fix that? We got to get people out. We got to spread them out. And then we got to I would even move the government out if I had to.
Force them to stay outside Manila.
Yes, because like a lot of, it's not going to be the first country. Kuala Lumpur did it with, is it Putrajaya when they put the seat of government there? Yeah, a lot of people don't like it because it's far from, yes, I know, but it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And yes, lead by example, maybe.
Right.
Our former transport secretary, Arthur Tugade, he did that with his team and he demanded that the DOTR went to Clark. And that caused all sorts of problems for him. I mean, it was a great idea, but they didn't like it. The staff didn't like it. He was even putting them on buses and stuff, because he was trying to lead by example, but it never stuck because we're also creatures of habit, creatures of comfort.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is also, we can't blame the government for everything because as much as they have a huge responsibility and as much as, yes, they have failed in many areas, but so do we. I mean, because we tend to like to,
right.
No, I'd rather prefer this. I'd rather than sit on a bus for an hour or two and stuff like that. So nobody really wants to make that first sacrifice because nobody wants to be the first to live out there in Clark or the one to live in Bulacan. So you got to create disincentives where you reward the people, the early adopters. Give them some reason to go out because you just cannot fit geographically. We just cannot fit anymore in Manila.
Yeah.
So it's like every square inch, we want to put a high rise on it. Nobody's thinking about ground level.
Right.
Like we all converge there.
Yeah.
What do we do? I mean, when you put 50 floors and we all come down for coffee and work and...
Yeah, I mean, you said decentralizing cities would be one solution, right? What are some other solutions? I mean, obviously public transports like subways and things like that, right?
Massive. You cannot have this conversation without that being at the front and center. Public transportation and a good one, a mass rapid transit system. So if I was to give them a magic wand, or just full authority, right?
Yeah.
I would say yes. If I could start from scratch, a subway is underway anyway. We're expecting that to be done in about 2029, and we're about 40% done according to their latest reports. This should be able to transport more than 500,000 people a day, which would take a huge chunk off the road. That is number one, because that's mass rapid transit. So that's going to be like your skeletal system underneath the ground. And once you get that underway, I would create high-speed rail from the airport, north and south. So you can get, as soon as you land here, you can go maybe as far as Clark. If you can go further, yes. But even if just immediately to Clark and maybe Laguna, so that those people you can get from the airport and then within 25, 30 minutes, you're already in Clark or Laguna because it's high speed. And that would be feasible now to live in Laguna, feasible to live in Clark and work in the city. It's not crazy anymore.
Yeah.
Once you get that mass transit system done, the rest can sort of be done with, I would dedicate bike lanes for sure. Shaded ones, make them proper use ones so that people get the hang of it. Because Metro Manila is actually quite small. I used to cycle around it, especially on holidays like Easter. I could do the entire Metro Manila in one day. The entire thing, like from Alabang all the way down to the port, down to Quezon City and back. It's not that hard. And it's relatively flat too. It's just the weather sometimes can get a little bit hot and sticky. Some people don't like that. But it gets cold in Amsterdam and people still ride. I mean, you work around it because it becomes the most efficient form. So people will gravitate towards the path of least resistance, right? And this is why rich people in rich countries take public transport.
Right.
They're not trying to prove anything. They're just saying it's faster. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is like, you're right. It's really not that far to walk from BGC to Makati, but we don't do it because it's not walkable.
It's not walkable.
I don't even know how you walk across that. Edza.
I would tell the only way that you could do that, you want to go down McKinley Road, right? That's about one where you wouldn't have to sort of like. But have you seen the sidewalks on McKinley Road? They just end abruptly. So you're walking, and then all of a sudden you just run out of sidewalk because it's just ended. It just that's it. And this happens too with motorcycle lanes, with bike lanes. You're on it and it just ends. And you're like, now you're mixing with highway traffic. There's a portion there on the South Superhighway, which is an expressway. And then there's a bike lane and it just merges into the traffic. And that's it. You're a bike in the middle of the expressway fighting for your life. And that's because you were following the lane.
Yeah.
So a lot of chaos there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, this is playing into how it affects real estate. How it affects real estate investments. I think a lot of these like very congested areas, like even if you're very central, now we're not going to see like, the real estate values that you would hope to, right? But even like people are looking at smart cities like BGC or mega township developments where they're designed by, mega corporations like Ayala and stuff like that. And they're turning to the places like this, but then all of a sudden we're on these little islands.
Yes.
And we feel very like, even I feel like I live on an island, like living here in BGC, right? Rockwell, you feel like you're living in a little island, and you don't want to leave because of traffic and stuff like that, And so it would be great. I mean, but I don't know if the willpower is there. I don't know if there's money to invest in it. I'm sure there is.
Well, it's just to add to that. There's what you said is so true because it is an island. Because when your area of responsibility ends here, it's just chaos after that, right? So, like Rockwell is a great example too. BGC being another one. So Rockwell's managed really well, right? It's really great. But the entry points now to get into Rockwell and out of Rockwell are just because there's only one choke point in one. Well, not one, but there's I think there's 3 choke points in and out, and that's it. BGC is the same. So it's okay when you have a walkable city, like BGC is a walkable city within the city for sure. But then if you have to leave the city, it gets a little, like going to Makati can be a 30-minute ordeal. And how far is it? It's 2 kilometers away?
Now you've invested in real estate too, right? You own properties in Rockwell and things like that.
Yeah, and BGC here as well.
Right. Have you shifted your mindset on how you invest in real estate because of these problems?
Oh, yeah. But not just because of these problems, but yes. Because initially, when I invested in the properties, I thought, wow, this is going to, I could see the prices rising, but I didn't quite understand money the way I do now. So I had to go through that learning curve. I invested because I thought it was going up, not realizing that it's just really matching inflation. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's all it. So you're on a treadmill financially.
Right.
You're not going anywhere. Right. You're just so better than nothing, right? So I'm not saying that I regret it because it did sort of. Had I just put that in the bank, I would have maybe that was 2019 when I bought. I'd have probably 25% less now, right? Maybe a little more, 30% less. If I kept it in fiat or cash. Then I discovered there are other investments like Bitcoin and stuff like that. So I was thinking, wow, when I got my first apartment, it was 33.3 Bitcoin. And that's 2019. And if I was to sell it now, I'd be lucky to get 3 Bitcoin for it.
Right.
That's how I measure things now. So real estate hasn't become the greatest, investment for me or hedge against inflation because I see that it just keeps up. Then there's maintenance costs on it. Then there's capital gains. Then there's VAT if you rent it out. Then there's agents' fees, property taxes. If you're using it to speculate, if you're using it as just a store of value, no.
I think that's what most people here use it as, a store of value, because
for lack of what?
Because you don't have the financial structure that you have in the U.S. For example, in the U.S., and the reason why the market is so liquid there is because, well, one, you have the financial markets that support the real estate market, right? So it's a much better financing option, right? So you're getting fixed rate mortgages at 4 or 5 times. You're leveraging up 4 or 5 times at a low interest rate, at a fixed rate interest rate, right? Plus, on top of that, you can write off so much losses from real estate. It's depreciation and interest. So, in other words, real estate is used kind of like a hedge against inflation, but also a tax shield.
Tax shield.
So you combine that, right? And you're leveraging your money up. So it's like if you're investing in Bitcoin, but imagine if you were able to leverage your money at 4 or 5 times, right?
Yeah.
Crypto, right? How
Yeah.
much more wealthier could you get from that, right?
Or how much poorer.
Or poorer, right?
Goes both ways.
Right. So when you exit on that real estate valuation, I mean, you could have invested $250,000 to buy a property, but when you exit, by the time you exit, you could potentially get a capital gains of $1 million.
Yeah.
Plus all the tax advantages that come with it. You don't have those structures
No,
in
we
the
don't.
Philippines. But I will say this, like for a lot of people here who, I think we talked about this, right? There's a problem with financial literacy here, right? And I think the first stage that people go through is real estate, right? But it's because it's the most familiar. It's not the easiest entry because of the high entry costs. Right, you have to afford your down payment or afford a house, you'd really have to have a lot of capital. Whereas you can get into, say, the PSE or nowadays, I would argue that Bitcoin might be one of the best.
I think it's more accessible now
yeah.
to get into crypto.
Right. Yeah. So I think and then you start that mindset. You start shifting that mindset. How did you go through that shift in mindset from all of a sudden going from real estate assets, more tangible assets, to being like, okay, crypto is it?
Yeah.
When did you get into
I'm
this?
glad you asked that, because that's something that I just have been through not long ago. I did it 2019 pre-pandemic. I was nowhere near as financial literate as I am now because I took it for granted. And I think I'm representative of a large amount of people, where you're viewed as, you're viewed like he's educated, he's employable, he seems like he knows what's going on. And I thought of myself as very capable, but I was completely naive about how it worked, how the system worked. So like you said, it became real estate. Why? Because your Tito told you, your Lolo told you, your dad told you, your mom told you. This is just advice through generations. Just you can't go wrong with land. You can't go wrong with land. You can't go wrong with land. So when I started making some money in my career, it started moving up as well. And I had a little bit of extra money. I thought, okay, now's the time to put it away. And again, I don't regret that, because at the time that was the best decision I could have made with the knowledge I had. So I bought the apartments, and one for each kid, because that was I have 3 kids, and I thought this is how I'm going to set them up for life. And then as I went through the pandemic, so it was 2019, 2020, we got locked down. I started going down the rabbit hole. Then I started understanding how Bitcoin works. My son introduced me to Bitcoin first. And like everyone's journey, you tend to dismiss it the first few times. But this is like about the 3rd or 4th time I'd heard about it. And I had nothing more to do in the pandemic. So I said, I'm just going to go down this rabbit hole. And as soon as I went down that rabbit hole, I realized how money works. And it changed everything. As soon as I was like, what is money? I was like, wow, I've got this all backwards, So that's when I started thinking, looking into the properties of Bitcoin as money, as pure money. And then I started understanding it. And that was where the shift came, because I started to see how, yes, real estate used as a store of value and a speculatory asset. It was the rich people just pricing the lower income earners out. Only they could afford the assets. Some of them had access to leverage, like you're talking about, when you're in that upper class. So you could leverage against that and borrow against, and then keep building your portfolio. But if you're a person with 10 properties, that you've way gone past the utility cost.
Right.
And then I started to understand the utility costs of things. And then I started to understand the taxes on things, the maintenance on things. It's when and to answer your question, it's when I decided I'm selling one apartment because this is ridiculous already. and I couldn't sell it. I just couldn't sell it. I was going below market value already. I told the real estate agent, what was the last one sold for? Go for about less, 5% less, 3%, whatever it is. I just want it sold. Nothing. Nobody was buying. And I was already at the point where I was just going to lose money on it. And then I thought, this is where I started doing the calculations against Bitcoin. And I said, wow, I paid 33.3 Bitcoin because that was the price at the time when I bought it. And then now it's worth 3.3 Bitcoin, and I can't even sell it for that. Bitcoin became liquid. It became something that's just, sovereign, that you can have custody, you can take custody of it, you can take it anywhere. And that's when I started to realize this is the future of money. This is where you go to store your value. It's not necessarily a currency for me, although it can be used as one. I don't think that's its main selling point. It's really as digital gold, digital oil, digital property. It's a store of value for me.
Yeah, I think too many people compare it. I think the problem with the argument for Bitcoin is that people will say, well, when you compare the gains on Bitcoin versus any other assets, it outperforms anything else. But I think that's the wrong way to think about it, because tomorrow it can easily, it's the most volatile asset too.
Yes, it is.
So tomorrow it can crash 80%.
Yes, it
right?
did.
And then so when you 50? Average it, at the low point, when you average it, it might still be the highest returning assets, but it might not be.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something, I think people overlook the fundamentals behind it.
They do.
I invested really early on because I believed in the design and the fundamentals, and it just made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And to a lot of people, it doesn't make sense, right? Mm-hmm. For you, where was the fundamental aspects of Bitcoin that just made sense to you, that you knew it was a superior asset compared to, say, fiat or gold?
Okay. I could sum it up in a saying that I love. I will no longer work for what another man can print. And that hit me very hard, because when I realized about money printing, I realized that somebody else from somewhere so far away in a centralized area that you'll never get to see or meet can basically destroy your time and energy and value with a push of a button.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I started to realize that Bitcoin is perfect monetary policy, it's finite, it's 21 million, everyone can see the code, everyone has to work for it, you don't give Bitcoin away, you don't airdrop it, everyone has to put the same amount of energy to get it, right? You just, there's no cheating that, right? If Satoshi was alive now, he would still have to buy, or if he was around, he would still have to buy new Bitcoin. He can't get it for free.
Right.
So it just leveled the playing field. And that's where I started. When the penny dropped for me, I was like, this game is rigged. This game is completely rigged. And Bitcoin's the only thing that solves that. It's as if we were to compare it to going back into an era where there was no timekeeping, and you just had to rely on the elites to tell you what time it was.
Right.
How would that work out?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one, the rich person will never be late. Mm-hmm. You'll always just be catching up. But the chaos that would cause, because it's fundamental to everything we do. Well, money is a base layer, and it's fundamental to everything we do. We can say it's as important as time. Therefore, it needs to be as scarce as time. And now it is. These are the only two things that you can say are truly scarce. 24 hours in a day, 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. In the Philippines, we'd say, ikaw lang mag-adjust. Mm-hmm. It won't adjust for you. It won't budge. So we have to adjust to it. And that's where I found its true value. I thought, oh my gosh, it can't be censored. That was a big deal for me, because I had been blocked from a couple of accounts. Not big ones, but like PayPal. They stopped my account. We noticed suspicious activity. What suspicious activity? Because I sold a few items and I got paid in PayPal, and now you want to know, yes, we want to know, what did you sell? How much was it? Who did you sell it to? Why? What business is of yours? We just had these policies. Then I started to realize this money's not yours. The money in the bank is not yours. It's owed to you. It's an IOU. All of these things came down to me. It's like it was just like raining all these realizations on me, going, what are we doing? This is a complete scam.
Right.
You talk about a Ponzi scheme. The US dollar is the greatest Ponzi scheme on planet Earth. Mm-hmm. When it stopped getting backed by gold, they backed it by guns and military.
Right.
You don't use it, we come and invade you. So it unravels this rabbit hole, and you start going down and going, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. So you go back to basics and say, okay, if everything goes to it hits the fan right now, like it did in COVID, what can you actually take and say is yours? It's only this, Bitcoin. Right. You can't take real estate. You can't travel with your real estate. You can't sell it in Africa or anywhere else. You got to sell it locally.
Right.
You got to also be at the blessing and permission of the mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, if he decides to put your taxes up, which they did in England, the farmers didn't want to sell, so they just raised the taxes until they couldn't afford to keep it anymore. Then they raised the inheritance taxes. Couldn't hand it down.
Yeah.
So everything is done by permission. This is the only thing out there that has no permission. You don't trust, you verify.
Right.
But it comes with responsibility. And I'm willing to take that because I was just sick to death of being censored. I was sick to death of the friction costs, asking permission to spend my own money. These things really bothered me at a cellular level. I was like, this is just wrong.
Right.
And so the more I got into it, the more fascinated I became with the topic. It didn't become like a get-rich-quick scheme for me, which is why I survived the 70% drop-downs. Had I gone into it, Bitcoin's the latest craze. It's like, people are making 2x, 3x, 5x. You're entering with a gambling. You're entering with a fiat mindset.
Right. You
got to get out of that fiat mindset. This is changing the game. So if you're looking at Bitcoin through a fiat mindset, you're going to get wrecked. Mm-hmm. I look at things. That's why I valued my apartment in Bitcoin, because as soon as you recalibrate your brain to see how much is this going to be in Bitcoin next year, you can delay your gratification. Mm-hmm. It makes you a little bit more responsible with things. Mm-hmm. It changes you. But the fiat mindset, that currency is not going to be worth as much next year. So the incentive to spend it is a lot greater, even on stuff you don't need.
Yeah.
And this is where it completely changed me. And I just can't go back now. But you do bring up a very valid point. If you don't look at it this way, if you look at it as gambling, I would highly suggest you don't do that, because you will get wrecked. Mm-hmm. Because on emotion, that when you hit your first 60, 50% drop down,
right,
and you don't have anything else to cling to, you're going to panic sell. And you're going to lose money. And then you're going to turn around and hate Bitcoin, say it's a scam. No, it's not a scam. It's like a dialysis machine, purifying the dirty money of the world. That comes with, if anyone's gone through dialysis, that process is going to be painful. But on the other end, we're getting pure money. That's sovereign and sound.
You think, so you can foresee a day when Bitcoin consumes pretty much all the fiat. So the
maybe not all, but yeah.
Yeah, well,
I hope.
Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about dialysis of dirty money into clean money, right?
Yeah.
And some people are realizing that. Maybe, if you think about the addressable market size of that, right?
It's 900 trillion, roughly. That what they're targeting is about 900 trillion. I don't think you're going to get even 50% of that. Mm-hmm. But even if you worked on 10 or 20%, that's 90 or 180 trillion dollars absorbed into one monetary system that is pure, decentralized, finite, immutable, incorruptible. That will change the world completely. And I think it'll happen like most things happen, gradually, suddenly.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting there to the suddenly part.
Yeah. I know we're on this Bitcoin rant, and I'm very passionate about this too, but we'll try to go back to the subject. But no, before we go, I think people don't understand that governments need to debase their currency. There is pretty good reasons for that, right? There is a reason why the U.S. got off the gold standard. From a
Keynesian economics point of view,
from their point of view.
From their point of view,
right? I mean, imagine if you were in threat of invasion from another country, and you need to raise an army. What are you gonna do? Borrow money, right? You're gonna be dependent on China to loan you that money or whatever, right? You needed to be able to debase your currency, print money, and do what you need to do as a government. I'm just
I get
advocate here, right?
I get it. The hairs are standing behind my back of my neck. But yes, I get it. And I appreciate it because I like to work through these arguments. I see the value of Keynesian economics which you're describing, which has a 2% inflation rate or the power to debase your own currency.
Is it really 2%?
Well, that's the thing. They say 2%. Is it really 2%? But I fundamentally disagree with that. I subscribe to the Austrian economics. So I see the value of it, but only for the government. It's like socialism. Oh, I see the value of it for the government, not for everyone else, right? There's somebody going to benefit, just not me.
Right.
So with that, I had this argument with my cousin, who is an economist for the government in Australia. So this guy is 25 years and very passionate about it. He's like looking at me like, "What do you know? You're just a Joe Blow." And I'm like, "Yes, but you're literally the problem we're fixing, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, I love you as a cousin, but you're literally the problem we're trying to fix. So of course I can't expect you to disagree with me or to agree with me." 2% inflation, why stop at 2%? Why not 5%? Why not 10? I mean, why the arbitrary number? They'll say, "Oh, no, because we can control it. And this way we can also stimulate the economy." Because if we don't have inflation, people won't spend as much, right? So this will create a deflationary society. And then what will happen then? The economy will grind to a halt. Well, you're not factoring human nature. Human nature is whether this is worth a little bit less in a year's time. I want it now because I'm human.
Right.
I want to wear this shirt now. I want to get this phone now. Yes, there are senseless purchases that I will definitely say that ain't worth it. But I still think we're going to consume. And to get into the deflationary argument, I think we talked about this over dinner one time, but this made a lot of sense to me when somebody explained it. It will never go to zero because what it'll bring everything down to its utility value. Because if you have this phone, right, and it's $1,000, an entrepreneur is going to come up and he's going to say, "Okay, I'll make that for $800. That's my value that I'm creating here." So now people go and they spend, okay, $800 for the phone. Somebody says, "No, I can make it for $600. Okay, $600. I'll make mine for $500. All right, $500. At some point, it becomes like, okay, I can't make it any lower than $412. Let's say that's the cost of materials and the people that get paid. Anything less than that, I can't eat. There's no entrepreneur that's going to come in and say, "I'm going to cut you off at 380. No, we've already hit so that deflationary environment will only hit the point of the utility cost of everything. And we will still move forward. But yes, the economy won't be stimulated in the same way. But when you're artificially stimulating it, it's like you're getting diabetes. Right?
Yeah.
So you got to think of it like that. I mean, there's a slow way to do it, but it's a healthy way. And eventually it will, I think, if you have the perfect money behind it, sound money, it will definitely work.
Yeah. Right now with the fiat system, we're putting an infinite valuation on finite resources.
Absolutely.
That's the way I see it.
It's true.
And until we reverse that mindset, then it'll always be the mindset of just more and more production and growth.
Yes.
Right.
And then another thing about that type of mentality is they don't distinguish the difference between spending. So spending $1 billion on a plant that makes whatever microchips. To a Keynesian economics mind, spending $1 billion to invade a country is still spending. That's still spending.
Right.
Doesn't matter. No, there are differences. You know, that spending $1 billion to invade another country, yes, it will help the people who print the money and the people close to the money printer. But it doesn't help anybody else. It just devalues everybody else's time and energy. So you're working 50 years of your life, and about how many years of that will eventually be inflated away? About 20 years, 30 years of that will be inflated away. That's on top of the tax you pay. What are you left with? So no, I think money is something that should be sovereign because it is our time and energy in abstract form. So therefore, we should be able to call the shots on how that's spent.
Right.
After that, everything's free game for me.
Right. And when they inflate the money, they're robbing from everybody.
Absolutely.
Right? Instead of just, nowadays, tax collection isn't even the major part of their revenues. It's debt.
It's debt. Exactly.
Which is money inflation, right?
Absolutely.
And the key to all this working is because it's centralized. Because fiat policy, monetary policies are centralized, they have the power to corrupt it. The key word with crypto and this stuff is decentralized. And that's the fundamental aspect behind this whole thing. But the beautiful thing is it's teaching us to shift our mindset into a potential world that's decentralized. right? Now imagine we're talking about all these traffic problems, and if you think, okay, in the beginning, the first thing that gets decentralized is finance, fintech, exchanges. Now, with this new technology, they're creating decentralized platform. They're creating what they call the DAO contracts, which I don't get into the details of it, but basically, it means that you can instead of a transaction, it could be in anything. Can you imagine a future or in a world? Maybe it's a little bit too far to get ahead right now, but imagine a world where they're talking about decentralizing government. Right. Yeah, what would that do for urban planning? Now with it, it's kind of scary because now if you couple that with AI now,
It's
like,
we're ripe for a huge disruption. Because what is a disruptor? A disruptor finds inefficiency, and it creates a better way, right? What's more inefficient than the government?
absolutely.
There's nothing more inefficient than other people spending other people's money
Yes.
on other things. You can't get more inefficient than that. This is why if you're following that Doge thing going on in the U.S. right now, you'll see these ridiculous things, absolutely ridiculous things. I mean, like studies on Rocky Mountain flea having sex with a Japanese turtle or something. What the hell's that? Why? Ponzi.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be spent.
Right.
It needs to be spent. It needs to be laundered. It needs to go out. And they're just creating things. Going back to what you said about war, and that's a very good point. I think Bitcoin, an underrated thing for Bitcoin, is it demonetizes violence. Because why would you fund the war on Bitcoin? You wouldn't do it. So you wouldn't also prolong a war. Imagine if they had to fight the Afghan war on Bitcoin.
Oh.
No, it would be over in a
Or
week.
the Ukraine.
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't even invade. You'd just say, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So, and then because back in the day, because we did this before 1913, right? We used to fund wars by selling war bonds, right?
Right.
So people would buy war bonds and they'd fund the war. And that only had a shelf life of about, 6 months to a year before people going,
Before, back in the Roman times, I think they had to go around and collect taxes.
collect taxes, right? So you needed to get public support for that. So public support would be like in the beginning, everyone's like, go get them. After 6 months, and you're like, hey, come on, solve this. Because
Can you imagine if we voted on wars that we wouldn't?
but that's the thing. But when you have a money printer like that, you can keep this going forever. And the industrial complex is getting bigger and bigger. I love what you brought up about the decentralization because my mind is just going crazy thinking about how the blockchain could actually replace government.
Greatest gift of Satoshi is the decentralized mindset.
The decentralized mindset that we
Imagining
didn't know we needed.
Imagine a world where everything was decentralized, where there was that would eliminate a lot of the corruption, no?
It would change the world in so many ways that you can't even think of right now. Corruption definitely is a huge part. Violence and war would be gone. Free trade would exist in a way that we've never understood it because we can say free trade, we've never had free trade because also it's underpinned by fake money. So there's no such thing as free trade. Tariffs exist, et cetera, et cetera. When you have a perfect monetary policy like Bitcoin, and then you have a decentralized system for government, oh my gosh, I'm just so excited thinking about the potential. Could you imagine? I mean, I don't know how I'm not a techie guy, but I'm trying to imagine how it would work. The blockchain being an immutable record, right?
We'll start with voting for
Voting, that's right. I was going to say voting would be a perfect application for that.
Right.
So if voting's an application for that, and it doesn't cost you really anything, because to start out to do a vote nationwide costs millions and millions and millions of dollars. You got to have the voting boxes and the poll watchers. So all that's gone.
Right.
You're now on a digital thing. That means you can vote for just about anything.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to have votes every 4 years. You would be voting like, okay, we're going to put 25% tariffs. This is the good side. This is the bad side. Vote. We're going to build a bridge here. It's going to cost this much, but it's going to give us this much back. Vote. And people vote. I'm oversimplifying.
But we're also assuming that people are smart enough to make these.
No, I'm oversimplifying the thing. But in theory,
yes,
having the decision taken away from a handful of corrupt people in a centralized spot like Washington, D.C., or wherever your seat of power is in your country, to take it away from that and to put it back into the hands of people. Now, I'm sure there are nuances, of course. I'm not pretending I have the answers to this, but theoretically, the idea of using the blockchain to put the power back in the hands of people, putting the government spending on the blockchain, putting the decisions on the blockchain, voting, I'm pretty sure that's a better world than what we're living in right now.
Maybe. That's assuming that people know what to vote for, right? And assuming that people can make rational decisions and things like that. Perhaps. But yes, I mean, the idea of decentralizing everything is at play. It's going to be a very long play. But like I said, first thing that's going to happen is fintech. But a lot of the problems with decentralizing is the basic operations of things, like things that could be solved with. So we were talking about this. I was talking with JP Kama, and we were talking about, and he's investing in some technologies around AI and decentralization of things. And we talked about what would a decentralized Airbnb look like, right?
Yeah.
It can happen, right? Instead of one company controlling the policies of what happens in this and that, it's decentralized. However, part of the problem with that happening is there's still the operation side of things that need to happen. The human interactions, the case by case problem solving, right? But nowadays, what's interesting, which is also scary, is now what's the progression of AI. Now you couple that with this, then maybe a lot of these decentralized applications could happen.
I can see that. I mean, like, you're right. There's some things that can't be replaced. The cleaners and stuff like that for the Airbnb, people who manage the property, actual physical management of the property.
Once you get robotics and AI together, and if it actually does work, we're not far away from it.
Yeah, we're not far. But even if you assume that still needed a human, you could still decentralize and just outsource that one thing.
Yeah.
Because that's possible.
Yes. It won't be a perfect system.
But I still think it's a better system than what we have right now, because it's like saying censoring is, well, if we didn't censor, people could say what they want and people might do bad things. It's like, well, yes, but I would rather that than create one arbiter of truth. Because how do you know that one person's version of the truth is better than ours?
Right.
And human nature kicks in. We're human. It's going to absolute power.
Yeah.
You can't help that. So decentralization solves that.
Right.
Because I think even the greatest, the best people on earth, after a while, exposed to that much power, you can't help yourself.
Yeah.
It
and it
corrupts.
solves that because now you don't have to trust any particular entity or group.
Think of the friction costs that we save. Just in the banking sector, how much we would free up in friction alone.
Right.
I mean, how much do we spend just in
Absolutely.
fees?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Those intermediaries would pretty much be gone. And, banking on a consumer level is fine, but in a central banking level is not.
Right.
Every war can be traced back to a central bank.
I can't wait till we have the first decentralized bank, or somebody tells me I can't have the money that's mine. Imagine a decentralized bank where policymakers can't meddle with it and compensate your funds, for example, or block this account or block that account.
It's
like,
sounds like utopia, but I'm sure there are many steps. Like we don't want to be naive, and like you mentioned, you can't have it all at once, right? Because people will. Yeah, we're also gluttons for. We'd screw it up, I think, too. Right. But slowly, you got to introduce it, and it starts with money because this is the base layer. Satoshi's already given us that. He's shown us the potential for that. Let's see if we can work what the money does first, and then when that happens, because Bitcoin is so pure, and the bots could now be using Bitcoin because they could execute.
Right. Microtransactions.
Yeah, microtransactions. I mean, you'd fund your bot, and your bot could be paying people, and it's all, the possibilities are endless. We are definitely entering a brand new era, a brand new phase of the world, and I'm very excited for it.
Well, now with this mindset of what you've adapted because of Bitcoin and stuff, has it changed the way you looked at, say, traffic?
Traffic.
Has it changed the way of how you looked at how things could possibly be in the future here?
Well, in some ways, yes. In some ways, yes, because I realize now that if you can secure yourself with Bitcoin, you would no longer be a slave to the fiat system and the matrix. What I mean by that is
You don't have to go to work every day. And
Exactly.
Deal with traffic.
Exactly. That's how I was thinking it would affect me. If you could now live in Tagaytay or somewhere, airy, breezy, grow your own vegetables if you want in your backyard, have that life, but you'd still be very productive because you could be a member of the financial. You're included in in your own financial system, and you could still trade. You don't have to be where everybody is anymore. Mm-hmm. That's the matrix. That's the fiat system. They want to put you into one area, control you like that. I think it would decentralize us physically as well.
Right.
And that's how I think it would affect traffic a lot.
Yeah.
Because why would you want to live in Metro? I mean, I love the Philippines. I don't see myself living anywhere else. I live here by choice. I have a British passport. I could live in many other countries. I choose to live here. This is home for me. But if I didn't have to work for a living anymore, if I didn't have to hustle every day, I don't see myself in Metro Manila anymore. I see myself in somewhere else, like Tagaytay or Laguna or somewhere else that's just, not too far out, because I still enjoy going down every now and again, catching a movie, going to the malls, nice restaurants, somewhere an hour away. That's enough for me.
So do you have hope that things are going to improve drastically around this issue here?
Are you talking about the Philippines or the
Yes,
world?
the Philippines.
Well,
Let's start here.
I start with the world first. That's the way I see it, because I see the trickle-down effect always happens here.
Yeah.
We're not really known for this. We're not in a position to be a pioneer or innovator.
So what countries would you...
I looked at the U.S.
U.S.
Yes, because the U.S.
There's
is...
so many problems with the U.S.
They have massive problems, but if they could solve this problem, and this is the first time I felt hopeful about it, because before this, my view of the world was so dark already. My trust issues were so bad.
Yeah.
And they still are to a certain degree, but we're learning not to trust. We're learning to verify. And this government's coming in, this new administration's coming in very crypto friendly. So they are opening it up. So they're basically deregulating it in a way, and they're taking out these problems that were these control systems. So I do have a lot of hope, because I think that if people get given this life raft, I see Bitcoin as a life raft, they can be their fullest selves. They can really finally, when you're working and you know that you can keep 100% of what you work, and you can keep it, and it grows. It doesn't lose money over time.
Right.
This changes everything. This changes it. I can't even begin to describe how massive that is, because it's like somebody is not on top of you, controlling you, the glass ceiling, how high you go, where you go. No, your potential is your potential now.
Okay.
So I get very, very hopeful and excited for this. And I see it trickling down here eventually, but we need a solid example somewhere else, like the US. We need to see them do it. We need to see them break out of debt, let's say, or at least get their debt under control or something. And then we see, wow, this will work here. Because our hierarchy of needs, people won't really see the value of Bitcoin yet in the Philippines. If we're going to talk about this on a mass level, it's not high on the list of priorities, and I understand why. You need to have that problem that you need to fix first before Bitcoin becomes valuable. So if you're day to day doing your salary week to week, you're not really feeling that store of value problem, the censorship problem. You think I'm crazy for saying it. You're like, it's nothing. But it only matters when it does.
Yeah. I think here in the Philippines, the common thinking for most people, it's like the saying of hand to mouth, right? Mm-hmm. You're making money, but it's barely enough to get by every day or every week, right? Now, if you could make money and have enough set aside where it grows, then all of a sudden your store of energy can grow in value.
Yes.
Then maybe that mindset could shift, maybe.
Exactly.
I think we're far from it. But
we're far from it, John, because what you mentioned, hand to mouth. How do you explain this? Like I was trying to explain it to our household helper at home. She's very bright, she's cut above, and she gets things and all that. And she came into a little bit of money, just a little bit of a windfall. And so she was asking, like, what should I do? My girlfriend suggested, well, if you have that windfall, why don't I keep your salary for a while and then give you interest on that, just to teach her the basics of saving and getting. That was about as much as we could do, because when I tried the Bitcoin thing, I just saw the glaze and I immediately backed off. I go, oop, too soon. Stop it. You're going to scare her.
Yeah.
Because you're not solving a problem that she has right now and she can't see it. So we're starting off with, look, if you take your salary in, let's say 2 months time, 3 months time, you're going to earn 3% per month more. We're just doing this to teach you that, this is, because if you keep it here, it's like a melting ice cube. They get that.
Right.
That they understand. If you didn't have a fridge in your house, ate, how do you keep food?
Yeah.
You'd be buying from the palengke every day, but you're buying at a higher price. You can't buy the big slab of meat anymore and save money because it's going to go off.
Yeah.
Well, that's like your money. And then, I get it now. So that's about as much as we can. So slowly, when she gets that and she gets a little bit more, then maybe we can show her, okay, I put this into Bitcoin, but I waited 4 years. If you can wait 4 years, this is what I grew. Then maybe she could see it. But you can't do it all at once, because she's looking at week to week.
You know what you need to teach?
What?
Time value of money.
Time value preference, yeah.
No, like okay. You need people to think, okay, if I sit in traffic for 3 or 4 hours a day, how much is that worth?
Yeah.
Can you assign an opportunity cost to that? Right? And can you make people realize what that cost? And if people did realize that, do you think they'd be more vocal? Do they think they would push for change more when it comes to...
It's a great thing that you brought up, because, again, same girl, because we love her. She's great. Right. She's family for us. And so we said to her, well, it was time to give her... Well, we felt it was time to give her a raise. She'd been with us already for a year or so, and I thought, okay, it's time to give her a raise, but what's her pain point right now? So we talked to her, and her pain point was exactly what you said. She was losing a lot of time, and she doesn't live far from where we are, but it would take her, especially on a rainy night, or it could take her 2 hours, and she only lives like 2 cities away. She lives in Taguig. We're in Rockwell.
Uh-huh.
We're in Taguig right now, Rockwell. But on a bad day, it would take her an hour and a half to commute. So we said, we got her a bike for that same reason, her time value. So we got her the bike. We'll pay the bike off. You get to keep the bike in, I think it's 2 years. But this solves your problem, and now you're home in 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And she completely understands that, because now she's there with her family. She gets to spend time with her kids. She gets to be with them, etc., instead of being on the jeepney. So she's starting to understand that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because they do feel that. That's like, I've unlocked this value. I've unlocked it somehow. Yes, and you took it in a form of a raise. Now, I could have given you the extra, but I'm instead, and it's great for us too, because it keeps her for 2 years with us. And that, I learned that because my brother did that with one of his employees in his company. He just didn't want to lose that employee, so he bought them a car, and he tied them up for 5 years. That way, the kid was so happy. Happens to be my kid, by the way. My brother hired him, gave him a car, but he gave him a car because he really didn't want to lose him.
Yeah.
And he locked him down for 5 years. And when I saw that model work out, that's when I did it to our household helper. And she loves it. She just loves it. Now, she's the first person in her family to own a motorcycle.
Yeah. And you said, people here are so resilient, right? And I remember, like, when I first moved here, sitting in the bank for a couple hours just to stand in line. We were just so tolerant in every corner. Like, people are just willing to just wait and stand in line.
Yeah.
And it's just like, they don't know any better.
Well, you brought up something earlier, and it's related to this. You said something about the that getting ahead thing. If you can get them out of the thinking week to week, paycheck to paycheck, day to day, hand to mouth. But then we think that way, but there are forces out there that would say, if we taught them that, then they would think for themselves and they wouldn't want to clean our toilets anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's their incentive. Don't teach them, keep them hand to mouth. That way they're so focused on just what's right in front of them, they don't have time to think about these other things.
Yes.
And that's why I mentioned the forces are always tugging against each other.
Yes. And that's why I asked you earlier, does someone profit from this? Because I hear
There's
that when it
always.
comes to politics, education, financial literacy. It's like there are forces in this country that doesn't want to empower people because of they profit from it.
You're from California, right?
Yeah.
So in California, they're missing something like 26 billion in homelessness, the funds for homelessness.
Yeah.
Okay, if they fix homelessness, are they going to still get funding for it?
No.
Exactly. So you kill the revenue stream. So why fix the homelessness?
Right.
So that's the same type of thing. You got to keep the homelessness there to get the budget. If you fix it, and this happened in healthcare too. You cure the patient, lose the client.
Right.
And this can be adapted to so many things. So I'm glad there are people like you out there who are showing financial literacy, because at least in one space you're having an impact.
Right.
Because people don't see it, and it's by design. Why didn't we learn about money, John? Why didn't we learn about money in school?
Yeah.
We consider, and in the Philippines, it's a taboo topic. I mean, like when you go to a job interview, unlike in the States and in Australia, where I spent a lot of time in Australia, in Australia, it's no problem. So, by the way, what's the package? Okay, it's 100,000 a year. Well, I'm used to 120 or whatever it is, right? You're talking about it. I'm not working for free.
Right.
In the Philippines, it's like they don't really talk about this, or sometimes they say, how much? Ay, it's up to you na lang. It's up. Why? Why are we like that?
Yeah.
We tend to just be uncomfortable around the topic of money.
Yeah.
That's by design, because only a handful of elite, they want that in their power. It's like the printing press before, right?
Yeah.
Before the printing press, we control the information. So that's it. We control the money. We control how it works. You won't understand it. Just sit there and wait for us to give it to you. Be dependent on us.
Yeah.
And that's why there's always forces, opposing forces.
Right.
And it applies to everything.
Right. And of course, we benefit from that as well, right?
Yes.
There's a huge disparity, and we benefit. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
I mean, we come here, and there's like we have helpers, we have maids, we have drivers, whatever, and we can afford that. In other countries, it wouldn't be so easy, right? So
I forget who said it, but the comforts of the rich are dependent on abundance of poor. I can't remember who said that, but it was a very powerful quote that sums up that.
Right.
We need an abundance of poor to have the comforts for the rich.
So then there's the other side of it, the other coin that says, hey, well, we all need to be equal. Well, that would create a better society. Like the whole idea of the Marxists.
But we're not.
Right? But we're humans.
We're not equal, yeah.
We don't want equality.
Well, you got to frame this properly, because this is the internet. That could easily be taken out of context, but we're not. I can't be. I'm not equal to Elon Musk.
Right.
I might be equal in God's eyes, for sure. I would like to think so. In God's eyes, I'm very equal to you, equal to him, equal to Elon Musk, whoever. But in an economic environment, there's no such thing.
Right.
So we can't fool ourselves. This is why DEI is such a huge topic right now, because you're trying to create an equal outcome.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing. Well, you can, but then you would severely impact it on the other side, because our efforts are different, our talents are different, our inputs are different, everything's different. So that's why there's a different outcome. Now, I agree completely that you shouldn't discriminate against somebody based solely on an immutable trait, their religion, sex, whatever. That's fine.
Right.
That's perhaps what it was born from. Maybe the rule was from that grain. But then we saw how it was completely turned around into trying to create a socialist sort of Marxist environment. And it's not going to work. You don't get the best people for the job anymore. You just tick a few boxes and...
right. I think the key is, I like to see a world where everyone gets a fair chance.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Everybody has the same access to education.
Yes.
Everyone has the access to make your own money. Like, you do what you can with it, but you're not going to be equal. The country needs merits. Like, you need to be you need to be in the right place based on your merits.
Yeah.
But you had a shot, right? And I think the problem here in the Philippines is, I think too many people don't even feel like they have a shot.
Yeah.
Right? And we talk about financial literacy, but there's so many other layers before financial literacy that they need a fair shot at. Basic education, basic health, mathematics, whatever. you know, before we can even go into the financial literacy discussion. But I think there needs to be a raise of that awareness somehow, some way, somehow, right?
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about with Bitcoin. We start with money.
Yeah.
Make that fair for everybody. Bitcoin is fair for everybody. So
do you ever see the Philippines government adopting a
no,
decentralized monetary policy?
I don't. You see, because it's counterproductive to a government.
But what if the U.S. started it?
That's different. That's why I'm excited.
Okay, so let's play the scenario out. Let's fast forward these scenarios. Let's play it out strategically. U.S. decides, okay, first of all, they're already the reserve currency. Mm-hmm. They're at the top of the pyramid, mm-hmm. right? They can borrow money from themselves. Mm-hmm. Whereas other countries can't do that. Argentina can't do that. No. Right?
They can't issue debt in their own, yeah.
Right? But somehow the U.S. can do that because we all trade in the U.S. dollars. Uh-huh. But they're going to take it one step further. We're going to say, okay, we're going to back up every U.S. dollars and peg it to Bitcoin. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, every other currency, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? We're not going to want to trade in any other currency but the dollars. Yeah. You're going to see a flight out of pesos, euros, whatever, into dollars. Yeah. Right? Any chance we get, at the very least. Now, all of a sudden, all these governments, what's going to happen to their currency?
Gresham's Law. Gresham's Law says bad money sends good money into hiding, something like that. So when you see a weaker... exactly what you're describing, we will flock to the strongest currency. So if the U.S. did that, they would create, similar to an arms race, everybody would just go, we got to buy Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And unlike an arms race or anything else that they've done, the moon race, there's only 21 million. That's it. Mm-hmm. So there is a finite finish line for this. And it's not just 21 million. I think a lot of people need to understand that about 5 million of these coins are lost, roughly. They're not even sure of how many, but they're estimating about 5 million are lost. Then you have the last 0.5% of Bitcoin will be mined over 100 years. Mm-hmm. So you can pretty much cancel that out, meaning that's negligible in the stock to flow. So you would be having the nations all fighting for this Bitcoin, but the U.S. leading the charge because, like you said, they're printing their own debt. So they're printing the money and they're buying a hard asset. They're the only country that could really do that. Other countries should do it for a little while, but they're going to hyperinflate very fast. Mm-hmm. The U.S. can spread that hyperinflation out over 4.5 billion U.S. dollar holders outside of America. That's their unique value. Right. Plus, all trade is denominated in dollars. So it is the blueprint. And this has been suggested to by Michael Saylor, who suggested they do exactly what you're saying, print the money and go one step further, sell the gold for Bitcoin. And then you get two birds with one stone. You get your Bitcoin levels up and you demonetize the gold for your enemies. Mm-hmm. Everything the U.S. does, they're in this powerhouse. They're the leaders right now. Right. And you would see everybody flocking to Bitcoin because it would just be a flight to safety already. Right. You just needed to get this life raft. That's it. There's only so many life rafts out there, and it's accumulate. This is why people are expecting gradual, then bam.
Yeah.
We're potentially happening this year. It potentially could happen this year. If they announce the Bitcoin strategic reserve and the buying of it already, I think within this year, we're over $1 million a coin. Because it's just going to create a FOMO like we've never seen before, because we're talking about nation states FOMOing, industry, institutions FOMOing. This is different to your retailers FOMOing. Weak hands, because what happens now is just, we get every crypto run, we have, this same thing, this FOMO happening, but this is all weak hands.
Yeah.
The first shock, they're out.
Yeah.
Look at the shocks that we've had recently. We had 25%, the tariffs were introduced like over the weekend. The stock market was just crashed.
Yeah.
Everything crashed. Bitcoin crashed too. It crashed less than about 10%. And then it bounced back in 24 hours.
Isn't it one of the biggest Bitcoin crashes recently?
It was in terms of volume, but not necessarily in percentage, see? So because of we're up there already in the 100,000 range, it liquidated supposedly, they said 2-point-something billion, but the figure is really 8 billion because they were not giving, it's the true figures about 8 billion liquidated shorts and longs and all that were gone. So this thing just absolutely crashed, but then went back up within 24 hours. Why? Diamond hands. It's institutional money now. So what we flushed out, you can already see. 4 years ago, John, you've been in the cycle you've been through how many cycles now?
Quite a lot.
4 years ago, when we had something like a black swan event like this, you're dropping 40%.
Right.
30, 40% overnight. And it takes how long to get back up?
Now 10%.
Now 10%, and it's just back up. It's like you can't shake it. I mean, the DeepSeek came out and dropped NVIDIA and dropped $562 billion out of the stock market. And Bitcoin just went, all right.
Yeah. So crazy.
It's crazy, but you see the shock waves are getting shorter now. Before it used to be anything. Somebody sneezed, Elon tweeted, and it would drop or raise. Now, you got the president of the United States already talking about it practically every day, and it's just like moving. It's just steadily moving up a little bit down. It's starting to get very secure. So also the opportunity is starting to. The volatility is getting lower. The opportunities are getting lower too.
I feel like all the fundamentals are going out the door. Everything you learned in business school, just throw that.
True.
Just throw that out the window.
And that is very key to Bitcoin, because that's why they say Bitcoin is an ego test, because everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve, because it's an ego test. You need to first accept that everything you learn is wrong. That's not easy. I was almost 50 years old when I came to this realization. I brought up 3 kids, put them through college on everything I knew. How do you tell yourself now that that's all wrong?
Yeah.
But at some point you had to sit there and go, yeah, it's wrong. Okay. It's not going to help if I sit here in denial for the next 5 years because I don't want to be wrong, because meanwhile, everything's going to pass me by. So I accepted it. This is the new way. I was wrong before. And what got me here won't get me there. Mm-hmm. So you just have to adapt in the world. And this is the latest thing to adapt to. This is a breakthrough that will only show its true significance, I think, in 10, 20 years' time. People really understand what kind of a miracle this Bitcoin is and how it saved the world.
Can I play out a crazier scenario?
Play out. I can talk underwater about this stuff.
Let's just play out a crazier scenario, which I know will never happen. But let's just say, even before the U.S. adopts Bitcoin as a reserve currency, right? You have other competing countries that might be debasing their currency, or maybe losing. Like, look at Argentina, for example. Let's say, for example, the Philippines was, they wanted to be disruptive.
Put it in the Maharlika fund, to say?
Yeah. What if they backed it up with crypto? What if?
If they were committed like El Salvador and Bhutan. If they were committed like El Salvador and Bhutan, and there was no monkey business, like they really were as committed as that, I think we could turn ourselves around and become a
global leader for
at
wealth,
least in Southeast Asia, for sure.
For wealth, right?
I think
generate a lot of wealth coming back into this country.
Because we're still in early days. A lot of people look at Bitcoin at 100,000 and say, that's it, it's over.
Yeah.
It's over for what? I mean, there is no top to Bitcoin because there's no bottom for fiat, as they say, right? So this is why countries like the Philippines, El Salvador, Bhutan, these are the countries that have the most to gain. Mm-hmm. I love racing, Formula One, etc. So this analogy works for me. When you have a Formula One race, right, you get all these teams. They're always the established order, right? There's always Mercedes either on top, or Ferrari or Red Bull, and then you've got the smaller teams. And every race will play out the same almost, give or take, right?
Right.
When does it change? When there's either rain or when there's a first corner, right?
Okay.
This is the only times that the other teams have a chance to jump up the order.
Right.
This is the Philippines. In the grand scheme of things, we're always going to be in a certain spot. We're fighting 1 or 2 spots above, but we're not leapfrogging Singapore or Hong Kong. No, we're not.
No, right.
But in a global chaos like this is like first corner. This is like a rain in a race. Now all of a sudden, wow, you could do something like adopt a Bitcoin standard or put it into your reserves like a Maharlika fund and just put it in there and commit to at least 20, 30 years of it and leapfrog everybody else, because the growth potential here is It's mind-boggling.
Right.
We're nowhere near because 100,000 is not the top for Bitcoin, because what Bitcoin is doing is absorbing all of this wealth that we talked about earlier, about $900 trillion worth of bonds, all the treasuries out there. These are returning what, 4 or 5%? When they start realizing, especially now that they have the SAB 121, and you can now list in your accounting rules, you can put your Bitcoin in your balance sheet. They're treating it like an asset now, a proper asset. You can borrow against it. This changes the game. So what it's going to do is it's going to absorb all those underperforming assets and store values and bonds, etc. It's going to absorb all of that. So we're only what, 2% there? Mm-hmm. That's the potential for Bitcoin.
Right.
So could you imagine if the Philippines did go hard on that?
Right.
And
Now all of a sudden everyone has a retirement fund worthy.
In 8 years' time, 2 cycles from now, my God, if we did seriously in 2 cycles from now, we would probably be debt free or close to debt free, and we would probably be in a different spot for sure.
It's a crazy scenario. I know it's not going to happen in the Philippines.
Yeah, we're just dreaming now, but we're just dreaming.
What if? Right.
What if? John, it would be the greatest thing, I think, to happen to the Philippines. I would love to bring in somebody like a Michael Saylor here, to sit down with the Treasury and the President and give them a session.
And you imagine all the people who have never thought about having a retirement fund. Think about that a lot. Your maids, your drivers.
I think about that a lot.
Right. I mean, what if everybody had to subscribe to this?
I think about that. And I shudder when I think about it for myself. If I didn't find Bitcoin, what would I be doing? I mean, like, how would I be really? I wouldn't feel the same. I would just be a different person because I wouldn't have the same confidence going forward in 20 years' time. I'm not sure if my pension fund will be,
right,
taken. Exactly, right?
That's the thing. Like we have Social Security in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And then you have your pension funds if you're working for the government or whatever. But that's very much dependent on trusting someone to manage it well.
Exactly.
Right? And for those funds to continue to grow, I mean, it's also dependent on, like, say, the S&P 500 or whatever the major companies. Mm-hmm. If there was a fund here, I don't know if it's based on the PSE.
I'm not sure how it works here,
but imagine, I mean, well, you are gambling on Bitcoin going up, which you believe.
Long term, yes, I believe.
Yeah, right. So I believe too, but you have to ride through those volatilities. Right?
That's the key. That's the key. You just have to know that there are cycles to this. Some people say the cycles will be obsolete soon,
right,
because everything's changed already. But I've already been through my first 4-year cycle. So I don't think anybody who hasn't been through a 4-year cycle will really understand what we're talking about. And I think you should have to go through your own 4-year cycle, because that emotional pain will teach you things that you could never learn in school or a podcast. You got to have that emotional memory that will really make you understand what this is. And yes, the drops and the volatility is a feature and not a bug. Mm-hmm. It's part of it. So you got to ride it out. But that's why I always talk about Bitcoin from a philosophical point of view, because I'm never going to talk to you about charts and future prices and stuff, because we're all guessing. Yeah. And really at the end of the day, it is fickle and volatile. Right. But fundamentally, the macro outlook for it never changes.
Right.
And it keeps falling upwards.
Yeah.
And if you do it on an average line, it's 40% CAGR, right? So, but you just got to sit through the 70%. Holy smokes.
Yeah, right. Totally. I was trying to figure out how to keep this conversation focused on Manila traffic, not on Bitcoin, but I can talk to you all day about this. But let's take it back before we end this podcast. Sure. Let's take it back. And I want to ask you, if you could make any bold predictions about Manila's future in the transport system, like, what do you think is going to happen over the next 10, 20 years here?
Okay, I'll start with what I think will happen. And I think the subway will make a massive dent on the problem, a good dent. I think we will
trust the government to run it well.
That's that. I can't say that I am that hopeful that it will be run well, but it will be still better. I think no matter how it's run, it'll still be better than what we don't have right now. So that will definitely help. But if we don't fix the major problem of decentralization, we're just going to create induced demand. And that's my biggest fear. That's why I'm so against building more roads, unless the roads that are leading outside, they're new, either not even circumferential roads. They have to be roads that take you outside, north and south, because otherwise you just create induced demand. We always get excited every time there's a new skyway opening up, and then within a month or two, it's like gridlocked again. And now those people have to converge somewhere again, right?
Yeah.
They don't live on the skyway, so that new patch of road just brought in another few 100,000 cars that weren't there. We had a record sale last year. Almost 500,000 cars we sold last year. That's the highest ever. So where are we putting all these cars? That freaks me out.
Yeah.
So without a proper plan to decentralize, we are not, unless we talk to Elon and the Boring Company for giving us 20 floors underneath the ground for different layers and levels of roads, we're not going to fix this problem. So I'm hopeful that the subway will help. I'm very nervous that we don't have a plan to decentralize, and we really need to put some kind of a building freeze.
You know, in Japan, they have this rule where you can't buy a vehicle unless you have a parking slot.
Yeah, well, we were pushing for that too here, but I didn't think much of the law. I mean, I didn't support it, and people are like, why? I thought you would be We already have no parking laws on the street. Why don't we just enforce that?
Yeah,
that's the problem we're trying to solve, right? So why don't we just enforce that? I said people are stubborn; they don't want to listen, and so you think they'll listen if you said a new law?
Yeah,
you can't enforce the old one. Why? What makes you think?
Right.
So that's what I have against it. The problem we're trying to solve is we don't want cars parked on the street.
Right.
Okay, then just tow the cars that are on the street. That's how you solve that problem. Because people will register a garage in Tuguegarao or Baguio City or wherever they are, right? And say, no, my car has a spot. I just am traveling to Manila to visit my friends. That's how they'll get around that law. In the same way that they said, oh, we will ban the car 1 day a week, right? This is called coding. This will solve 20% of the problem, right?
Does coding work?
Of course not. What it did was it's supposed to take away one car off the road 1 day a week. What it eventually did was add 2 cars 6 days a week because everybody got a second car, or the people who were affected got a second car. Do you think they're using that car 1 day a week? No, they're both now 2 cars 6 days a week. So we really created a bigger problem. The only one that's happy is the auto industry.
Yeah.
I worked for the auto industry, so yeah, I had some good times there as well, but it didn't solve a traffic problem. Right. And this is why I'm so against these short-term solutions that are just not thought out. You got to have a longer-term plan.
If you can make one change and one change only to solve this problem, what would it be?
Magic wand?
Is it a magic? You have a magic wand.
I would already go autonomous cars because you'd have to really restructure the city to accept it. But autonomous cars, ride sharing.
That's just around the corner.
Yeah, but we'd have to restructure our.
That's true.
I mean, can you imagine an autonomous car driving around Metro Manila with the juicy fruit vendors jumping in front and the sampaguita vendors? And this is...
We might be the last country to do it.
There's no AI strong enough to go around, to drive around. But yes, imagine if we, let's say, said, okay, we have, let's say, the COE, like they in Singapore, Certificate of Entitlement, so you can only have 1 car per family or whatever the rules were. That's it, right? You live in Metro Manila, you can only have 1 car per family. This is your assignment. But we understand that it's still your right to travel safely and privately because we don't have enough public transportation for everyone. How we'll do this is the Waymo system and Teslas or whatever. These cars will drive around. We have no safety issues because people are generally worried about the drivers being, violent or stealing from you, whatever. If you don't have a driver, no problem. You remove that. Mm-hmm. And then you really have a proper ride-sharing system. Don't need to own the car. Just use it when you want to use it. Yeah. It's clean. You don't have any problems with safety. That's how I would, because I think pound for pound, that's still going to have the biggest effect. But that's a magic wand because you can't just put autonomous cars straight away and mix them with our jeepney drivers. And
can you imagine you have an autonomous car that actually follow traffic rules, and then you have everybody else?
Yeah,
this car would never get anywhere.
Exactly. It would never get anywhere. I had a little funny anecdote. I had a family friend that I taught to drive, and I said, okay, this is my gift to you. I'm going to put you through a proper driving school, right? Put him to the Honda Driving Academy in Sucat. Very legit place. They have their own.
Yeah,
Very. Yeah, you've been there. Okay. He did that, and then when he drove out of there, he was a hazard because he was the only one following the rules. And I was like, "Bro, you got when in Rome, bro.
Yeah.
When in Rome."
Yeah, you gotta drive like an asshole to get anywhere
exactly.
here.
Now you're the problem. It's like, we're not following the rules. Yeah, that's the problem. You're the only one.
It's so ironic because Filipinos are the kindest people too. Yeah,
they are. As soon as we make eye contact, yes.
Yeah. That's great. Well, it was great having you here, James. I think we should come back and talk more about crypto, especially when this new administration comes into power. And then we'll see what happens. Let's have another discussion about this.
Sure, because we're actually one of the bigger crypto markets, believe it or not.
Yeah,
we're really gaining.
On that point, if I was a young investor here, like let's say I'm middle class, upper middle class, just coming into money. I don't have the money to buy a condo. I don't have money to put in real estate. Such a high barrier to entry, right? For some reason, the PSE has been trading sideways since the 2013. And I can't seem to find an answer why. Like maybe there's just not trust in this equities market, right? Bitcoin's your best bet. Might be one of your best bet. I'm not giving financial advice here. I definitely think there's a lot of scam
definitely
crypto out there, and I would only bet on Bitcoin.
Me too.
But it might be your best bet.
I think what's safe to say is to study Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's a safe thing because it's not financial advice. Just study it. Just study it. Please study it. And you're going to go through your 10 hours, then your 100 hours, and then your 1,000 hours. And you're going to go through different stages where you're going to realize this is the greatest thing that ever happened.
So wait, you wouldn't recommend investing in a vehicle when you get a bit of money? Because that's the first thing you do when you get a bit of money, right?
Is put where?
You buy a car.
No. That's the last thing right now. Like that's another thing that's changed me a lot is before I used to lust after those things like watches and cars and when I get enough, that's going to be my. Now your brain gets rewired. You think no, that's I'm going to lose X percent and this percent. Then I'm going to get Bitcoin. Even my girlfriend, it's one of the best things I've introduced her to because prior to that, she was also like that. She was looking for the bags, looking for the jewelry and stuff like that. Now, every time she gets money, she's just like, buy the dip. Do you know what that does to a person's brain? She becomes a different person.
Yeah.
Now when she walks through all those shops or whatever, she's not looking at those things because she sees that as it's such a fiat mindset.
Yeah.
And that's what I would love people to just get into that. Forget the investment side. Let that be the bonus later on. See how it rewires your brain to have longer time preferences, learn delayed gratification, and understand money.
Did you guys hear that? Coming from James Deakin. Don't buy a car. Buy Bitcoin.
Me personally, because I get to borrow the cars. So that's why I get to scratch the itch on someone else's account. But before I get completely roasted for this, we live in a real world, so you have to reward yourself. Everything is not just about, because if I was saying, okay, this is the sensible thing, why do we even have different color shirts and all that? Because we're human. We want to indulge. We want to spoil ourselves. So if you do want to get a car and that does make you happy, make sure you have enough. Don't go into debt for it. That's silly. Mm-hmm. And then reward yourself. But then just understand that if you wait a certain amount, that car is going to be worth half the Bitcoin in 4 years' time or 3 years' time. Rent the car for a while. Yeah. Scratchy it that way. I mean, because you'll find sometimes it's just that. I mean, I would love a Lamborghini or Ferrari, whatever, but I know if I ever had the money to get one, I would drive it once a month or so.
Yeah.
I could rent one.
Yeah.
Or borrow one from a manufacturer for a review. Do it like that. Just be smart. You don't have to buy the cow if you can get the milk for free.
I wonder how many car enthusiasts sees you on the thumbnail, clicks on this podcast.
Yeah.
Thinking they're going to get something about cars and,
I mean, I still... I'm dreaming to buy another car, and it's an old car. It's an old Land Cruiser. I just love this. An 80 series.
Was it LC
80?
Yeah, LC80.
Like a 30-year-old LC80, but pristine. That's my dream. Just to have Now that's a reward for me. Yeah. Okay. There probably money would be better off in Bitcoin. Doesn't matter. That's something that I aspire to. So yes, you got to scratch the itch too, because we're living. You only have one life, and the essence of life is to live it.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that was good advice, James.
Maybe we should do a take. That was a good practice.
Yeah.
Should we do a take? Roll.
Right on, James.
Thanks, John.
Thank you
so
for,
who talks more, Chris or me?
Joining us. If you like this podcast, please consider subscribing, and please share your comments below with us. Let us know what you really think about the traffic problem in Manila, whether you agree with James in terms of how we would go about fixing the problems, and let us know if you think crypto is a better investment than buying your next car.
Use my promo code. No, just kidding.